Hi guys, the first thing I want to do here is give you guys a little bit of a update on how to do your vocabulary cards that will help you out throughout the semester. So I made a couple vocabulary cards here to give you a idea of what to look for, but before we do that, I'm going to go over the rubric that I have given you guys. A couple things you just need to keep in mind for your vocabulary is that it needs to be recorded in color. All right. So your vocabulary cards are in color, not pencil, not just all pen, but in more than one color actually. All right. Um, Next thing, word just goes on the front, and the other three things that I'm about to talk about go on the back. So word on the front, everything else on the back. You're going to have at least 30 of these things due every um, unit, or every chapter rather. Every chapter you're going to have about 30 of them due, and that's going to be really easy to do. You're going to have to actually miss some. So most of you will probably have more than 30 if you really want to do well, but 30 will be the minimum for each chapter. And then the last thing will be you're going to have your definition in own words, that's one. Your application to the real world, that's two. And that's the most important part, right? If I talked about taking notes in the last video, in this part, application to the real world is key. You got to figure out a way that you can apply that definition or that word to something that you can understand. And then finally, the third thing is you can choose one of three different options here. You can do a picture, an analogy, or a mnemonic. I'm going to give you an example of an analogy and a mnemonic because it's a little bit harder to explain, and you guys can come up with a picture on your own if you think that's going to help you. So this is just an example of what the back of the card would look like right here. What the back of the card would look like. So they did general adaptation syndrome. The definition in their own words is their body's response to stress by going through three stages: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. So that's their own definition, real life connection. When they have too much schoolwork, the first thing they do is get hyper. That's their alarm. They get more and more tired. That's resistance. And then exhaustion. Finally, they get sick. All right? I put three different, for all of the three different things you could do, analogy. An analogy always has is like or is not like in it. An analogy always has is like or is not like in it. This is a lot of times the easiest one if you can't think of a good mnemonic or a picture to do. An analogy is that you'll oftentimes find yourself doing it, but you got to have some general adaptation is like, or stress is like, something is like, or is not like. That's how this is going to work. So stress is like putting your body into overdrive. A mnemonic would be gas, general adaptation syndrome. If you remember gas, and like putting your foot on the gas to make your body go, that might help you remember this. In a picture, you might draw a person getting more and more stressed out, somehow incorporating the words I would. Okay? So there's that. Moving on to a couple more flashcards ideas. So I came up with sensory memory, all right, on one side of the card. Moving to the second side, this one I kind of cut off here accidentally, but you'll get the picture here. So in the top left-hand corner, just like before, the first of three memory stages, and it's a brief sensory impressions of stimuli. So you got to understand what stimuli is too, but it's the first of three memory stages. So this tells me that I know that I'm talking about stages here. I've got three of them, and it's a brief sensory impression. Okay. What this side says is my personal application that I made is I heard my, and says baby over here, I heard my baby cry from the other room while I was reading. And the reason why that's sensory information is because I wasn't trying to pay attention to it. My senses, my ears just picked it up, and it left an impression for a few seconds. Now I can choose to, if I was really, really involved in the book, or if it was somebody else's kid, I might just take that for that split half a second and never even do anything with it. But since it's my own kid, I'm probably it's gonna register with me, and I'm gonna have to get up and see what's going on. And then finally, I did an analogy here for this one. It says sensory memory is like the mind's taking a snapshot of stimuli and storing it for less than 1 second unless it is converted to short-term memory. STM is a abbreviation for short-term memory. So sensory memory is like the mind, is like, there's the analogy part, is like the mind taking a snapshot of stimuli and storing it for less than a second unless it is converted to short-term memory. So the analogy part here would be the snapshot would be that where you would get the analogy in, because snapshot picture taking a snapshot is a very small, brief second of something else. If you wanted to take a longer instance of something, you take a video. Snapshot just gives you a brief moment of what was happening at that time. Next one I did was retroactive interference. Retroactive interference, and both of these are terms we're going to come up with in the first unit, Unit 7A. Retroactive interference, forgetting when newly learned info prevents retrieval of old info. When newly learned information prevents retrieval of old information. So that's my definition in my own words. Application, when I moved schools, I got a new ID number that says ID, by the way, ID, and couldn't remember my old one any longer. You might get this if you have a new locker from one PE year to the next. You'll remember your locker final year, and then the week after you get your new locker, you won't remember your old locker number anymore. That's retroactive interference. And I did a mnemonic to help me remember this one on the bottom. Retroactive interference. We take the E here, and we use that, and we say that new information interferes with old information. And that helps you remember retroactive interference. As we'll see in class, for the other type of interference, we're going to use a similar mnemonic to help us remember that. But vocabulary cards are key. Every part of this is personal. This is your own definition. This isn't just the one copied out of the book. This is your own personal application, not just one, the example that the book gave you. And then come up with this. What this is doing is it's forcing your brain to make connections in ways that you wouldn't get if you just read. It's forcing your brain to make those connections. Those connections are what helps you remember. Those connections are what's going to help you do well on the test. So these are probably, if not the most, one of the most important things that you can do in this class to do well. And that's about all I have for this. If you have any more questions, see me or email me.